How's it going, everybody? This is essentially a flashback episode of all the videos that I've done so far, but I laid everything out into steps based off of how I pulled the bike apart thus far. And the reason for that is to hopefully make it easier for you as well as easier for me when I put it back together. Let's get into the weeds over here. So the first thing that I did, step one, was drain the oil. There's a little lug nut at the bottom where I used a size 17 socket head in order to screw this guy off. And what we have is a M12 by 1.50, 13 millimeters from the bottom portion here, which includes the washer. The second thing that we did was we drained the gas. So you see these blue hoses over here. I just popped one of the fuel filters from here. I took a funnel, all the gas into a bucket, and then after that we were good to go. Step three was pull off the air filter. And so you can just take a standard flathead and a Phillips, and then these should be able to just slide right off. We're not getting into the weeds with this because it's not pertinent to what we're doing. So the next thing that we did was remove the chain guard, and we took a size 10 socket head and removed the three M6 1.0 by 12 millimeter in length bolts from the chain guard, and that was because it was interfering with some of the parts that we needed to get to. Step five was we removed the carburetor. Again, we used a 10 millimeter socket head. We removed these two M6 1.0 by 22 millimeter bolts and nuts. Hey dude, these flies are just... Step six, we move over to the foot pegs. And the reason why was when I got under the bike, I found out that these were being held in by 4 bolts, and 2 of them were over here. And then how the unit went, oh my goodness, was they overlapped kind of like that, which is why 2 of the screws were longer than the others. So over here, we removed the M8 1.25 by 25 millimeter bolts from the foot pegs. And so we did this with a size 12 socket head. Fits succinctly into that. So I removed the back ones first, then I removed the front ones. And so we were able to take this off, and then this was primed and ready for step 8, which was remove the M6 1.0 by 12 millimeter bolts from these units over here, 2 on each side. And they fit on here, not on here. Step 9, we remove the hex nuts from the head down here. These flies are now starting to act like the sentinels from the Matrix, where I guess after being in the environment for a little bit and having the flies get a whiff of the off, they're now docile. So we remove the hex bolts from the bottom, and that part goes into here on the engine block head. This is part number 11. It's just called the front bolt. And so this bolt is an M6. This side over here is 10 millimeters. And then this side over here is 30. And so we remove the hex nut first because this piece goes under here. And as you can see, you can screw it in. And so this piece juts out, and then you put the exhaust in, and then you throw the nut on it. And then after that, you have your hex cap nut, 8 millimeters, and this attaches onto the muffler screw. This would be an M8 1.25. And then below here, you can see that this socket just screws nice and neat back here. So this is a part that you don't necessarily need to take off. So this step is kind of reversed over here, because what we did first was take off the chain. And how we did that was we took the joint system, which has this. It has this washer that goes on top, and then it has this snap plier over here that you would bend open, and then you would slide this unit into here, and then you snap it in once you have the chain tightened. But you use snap ring pliers to pull that guy apart. You use a hammer and a small nail to break the chain link. Then afterwards, the only thing from the brake that you would need to take apart is this spring. There was a spring that goes back there, and you had to remove it from somewhere along this area to make room to take these two bolts. This one is the part where it goes through the top over here, because there's a clear size difference between this side and this side. Your bolt is shaped like this, and if I recall correctly, this was probably about 130 millimeters from this point down to the bottom, along with, I would say, 10 millimeters from this side. And this one was also the one that was double bolted in. And then in the rear, you had one nut, but the bolt size was 100 millimeters. And you took that off with a size 17 socket head. After that, I used this homemade block that's currently being used to hold up the engine. And this was just makeshift. You can do it however you like. But over here, your box in question is over 1 foot. But what matters is the interior. And so it looks like it's a hair shy of 10 inches by 5.5. And then you want it at least 6 inches tall. And so that was the unit that I pushed underneath the bike to lower the motor in, to which afterwards I took out, obviously, the battery case along with this weird screw that goes in there. So you had your battery case, then you took your two little, I believe this was an M6 1.0 by 10 millimeter or 12 millimeter, 2 bolts out of it with a size 10 head. I unplugged the battery and its various unique features. On the battery, you have this little bracket that's supposed to keep it firmly in the unit. I took some needle nose pliers, I bended them, and then essentially just slid this out from the bottom of this unit. And then I removed the battery and the battery bracket. And then this is where we started getting into the fun stuff. And so what I did was I took out the key socket first. The wiring harness was all kinds of taped up and whatnot, but normally you could just be able to unplug these very simply. But part of what makes this guy a little bit quirky is the fact that how you get it on and take it off is you slide through here, but then you got to be very meticulous about how to squeeze it in there, because if you can already see, the rubber is very tempted to kind of protrude out. But after you get it through the hole, you keep the washer in and then you secure it by tightening this with a wrench. And then you would plug it in or plug it out in this case. And then after that, I just took a standard Phillips head and removed this M6 1.0 by 15 millimeter along with the headlight screw, which is a flathead. It's an M4.70 by, let's go to the millimeters, by 35. And so essentially I removed this piece from here, which removes it from the spring, and then I pulled it apart from the headlamp bucket, which is over here. This is the gauge where it'll feed into the odometer. So what I did was I unscrewed it with a wrench and then pulled that down, and then I just started unplugging, and a lot of the wiring is color coded, so that made it all the more easy depending on what the heads look like, which he had these double headed socket thingies, whatever you call them, and your singles. And it was just pop, 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 pop. And then I took a hammer, whacked this thing out because it was secured on tightly by these metal flimsy brackets. And then after that, I did some more unplugging. This is the new wiring harness, by the way. After I unplugged everything from the headlamp and the odometer, I unplugged everything from the rectifier. And then what I did was I screwed this piece out. And now that we have a better angle on what this is, still trying to find a way to get this out. But the way that it was designed was you have this bracket. This juts out through the frame. So on the other side, you have your little hex nuts over here, and you just screw them on the other side. But over here, this is where this would slide, and then you would slide the rectifier through, and then you would screw it on like that. Then afterwards, we went around the perimeter and got these M6 1.0 by 30 millimeters, and took the remaining 3 out because this one goes in here, all the other 2 go back there, and then this is the part, as I mentioned earlier, where you had the weird 70 millimeter bolt, and then I just removed it along with the hoses. Over here, what I'm getting in the mail is a new bracket piece. This is welded on, this unfortunately is not, so I ordered one in the mail. Looks like you have maybe about a 80 millimeter to 100 millimeter with a M6 screw head on the top there. Then we went to the engine where we took a size 10 socket head, removed the gear shifter and the kickstart, just unscrewed those, whacked it with a hammer. And then I took the whatchamacallit off. And then I went into the sub-transmission, which we removed the sub-transmission cover, which revealed part number 2, the gasket. And then we have these sub-transmission cover screws, which one of them would be part number 18, which is the M6 by 40, and that goes into that corner right there. And then after that, we took out everything one by one, starting with the combined sub-low gear, which is part number 6. And then this unit essentially is number 9, the fork subshift, 10, the shaft shift fork. And then inside you have number 8, which is the spring that's loaded in this part of the fork. And then number 22, the steel ball, which keeps it in place and also just keeps it snappy between high and low gear. Afterwards, we pulled this apart, which was part number 5, the gear sub continuous or something like that, along with the counter shaft. And the counter shaft is defined by this little nub and this little hole, and you just keep it together, slid in there. And then you take your snap ring pliers and you extend the snap ring 0.20, you squeeze and you lift it off, and then that reveals the washer, spline washer, which is part number 13. This is part number 20, and then this is part number 7, which is the sub gear. And so that allows you to be able to take off the crankcase. But before we do that, we take off F these flies. We take off the alternator cover, which is part number 3, which reveals part number 4, the gasket. And then you have 3 M6 by 18 screws, which is part number 13. And then that was where we removed all the further screws, the screws 17 through 19, which then revealed the gasket and then the contact, which for some reason was stuck on here. And just for safekeeping, I kept that there as well. Same with the knocker pin, which is number, I believe, 20. In this part as well, which is not shown over here, you have your oil seals, which is part number 15. And then you also have every mechanism in here that operated the switch down in here, which that you can see in that video, but you have no need really to replace those parts. When you remove that, you also have the ability to remove the sprocket, which is underneath. So you would pull the casing off and then you would pull this out, which brings you into part number 1, which is the crankcase. And you would keep parts number 4, 9, 8 intact inside of there. And I believe there's an O-ring there as well. You also have part number 19, 15, part number 2, and part number 3, which go in there. Your oil seal is something that's not going to get taken out. And then after that, you remove the retainer ball set, which if you can see in these grooves, they fit right in there. Part 10 is the retainer ball. Number 7 is the spring. Then you gently remove the clutch lever, which is part number 5. Then you take out this clutch plate, which inside here, part number 8, you also have number 12, the spring, and then you have the oil through, which is right over it. And so that's what it would look like one of those things from the Matrix. Then you would get into clutch territory. So what we do is we take out these M6 10mm screws. There's 2 of them. The bearing should just hop out right immediately. Over here, again, I am not sure how people like this YouTuber or this YouTuber were able to do anything without any sort of weight resistance, but I taped some weights on here and I made sure to have the unit weighed down, making sure this pinches whatever part that is. And then I took my 1/2-inch driver and I stuck it in between the nut lock crevices, which you can see that better. And at first I hammered it, and so I just did whatever I could. Then I put it in an impact drill and was able to get that out. And what it revealed was this part and the lock nut washer, and already revealed underneath you have your gasket. And then I went ahead and got some Allen sets for this in particular and just replaced every single one with an Allen wrench. That way we're not having to dilly-dally. You slid these units off, and then I took my snap ring pliers, and then all I had to do was remove this. Wish I could do more, but these flies are just so freaking annoying. And so that's where we are currently in this project. Hopefully this kind of gets you through the weeds of all the other videos if you want something more concise. I'm gonna pack these up now to get ready for the remainder of the engine teardown, as well as everything else having to do with the body, the handlebars, etc, etc, etc. And then I'm going to be putting these 2 bikes back at the same time, which is why you see everything arranged in 2s like Noah's Ark. And so hopefully we can get everything done. So I'll see you guys in the next one.